What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video will be a continuation of the how-to series talking about Professor X, how to use Professor X on offense. He's not much of a defender for the most part. He is primarily an attacker, so this video will specifically be covering how to use him on offense. First things first, let's talk about the signature ability. In my opinion, the most important aspect of the signature ability comes from the first bullet point. While below 75 channeling charges, gain 1 charge per second, and then on defense he gains charges until he reaches 100. I think that is probably the most important aspect of the signature ability. The prowess potency increase based on the opponent's power bar is nice, but Professor X's prowess are already incredibly potent, so it doesn't necessarily make as much of a difference as that first bullet point. At least in my opinion, I've been playing Professor X for a long time, and I've used him unawakened, I've used him awakened, I've used him Sync 200, so I feel I have a general, pretty solid understanding of Professor X and how I feel about his signature ability. So, always active. We're going to just run through a lot of this because Professor X, he doesn't really get too complex until you get into the actual rotation. The kit itself is fairly straightforward. He deals energy damage on his basic attacks, and most of them, except for his first medium, are non-contact. He's immune to reverse controls. He has a falter passive that can prevent you from taking hits from basic attacks, not special attacks, basic attacks, and you can utilize this when you're in your rotation to basically get a guaranteed free opening for either a heavy attack or a special attack. And then the falter has a cooldown, which you can reduce the duration of by dexing or dodging. Essentially, just dodging an attack, you can reduce the duration by 1 second every time you dex. Falter is very useful. So these Cerebro charges, they're only relevant for his synergies and for his special 3. They max out at 4, and basically, if you for every Cerebro charge you have, your special 3 will give you a big prowess, so a prowess larger than your normal prowess buffs for 40 seconds. It maxes out at 4, so if you have 4 Cerebro charges, you go for your special 3, you get 4 60% prowess buffs. Very nice. It's very useful in questing content, and you can definitely find uses for it for like a long form content as well, because Professor X is pretty good in long form content. So let's start with channeling, the most important aspect of his kit. Professor X channels his telepathic abilities, gaining 10 channeling charges per second at the end of a special 1 or special 2, and while charging his heavy attack. So heavy charging and then channeling after a special 1 or special 2. He'll kind of put his hand on his head and do the Billie Jean is not my lover sort of thing. That's how he gets his channeling charges. So you ramp up to 100 of these channeling charges to enter Mind Control. Now, additionally, with channeling charges, before we get to the mind control and the aspects of that, while at 25 channeling charges, Professor X cannot be evaded or miss because he gains a vigilance passive, allowing attacks to miss. This does not trigger against tech champions or psychic shielding champions, just to be, aware. He's not going to work against any tech champions with this ability specifically, but it's still very useful for the broad champions in the game, respectively. While at 50 plus channeling charges, using the 4th light attack in your combo will inflict mind control, although it will be at a reduced duration, so it's not going to last as long as it would at 100 charges. So with this 4th light attack, you can kind of save yourself if you're in a bit of a bind. Let's say you accidentally push the opponent to 3 bars of power. You can use this 4th light attack to go for an execution kill of either your special 3 or special 2, whatever power bar you have, and it can be very useful to help you in a bit of a pinch. Now, channeling, completing, and canceling. This is a very important aspect of his kit. This is the dividing factor between more nuanced Professor X players and more like beginner intermediate Professor X players. More of the nuanced and pro Professor X players utilize channeling very, very effectively, and I will show that in this video. So when you complete or cancel a heavy attack, so you cancel your channeling or you finish a heavy attack, you'll gain 10 additional channeling charges. If you cancel the channeling by blocking, charging a heavy, or using a light or medium attack, or a special attack, you'll gain a prowess buff. So any of those actions while channeling, you cancel your channeling by doing one of those actions, you'll gain your prowess buff. That's how you start to gain them. And then if you dash backwards, you refresh the duration of all of your prowess buffs. So Mind Control, I already mentioned, it lasts 0.5 seconds for every 10 channeling charges. Like I said earlier, if you started at 50, it's going to last way less time than it would at 100. The opponent cannot gain power, and they're also special locked during Mind Control. And then Professor X's special attacks cost up to 70% less power based on the number of channeling charges. And it's reduced to 40% against techs or psychic shielding, so just don't really use him against tech champions or psychic shielding champions. For the most part, just avoid that matchup for Professor X. So, Mind Control duration is paused during Professor X's special attacks, except while channeling. So, if you are channeling, Mind Control starts to tick down on the timer, but it will not tick down during your special attacks. So his special one gains 25 channeling charges. This is not necessarily a great way to build up your channeling charges for the most part. It can be helpful in a bit of a pinch if you need to instantly refresh your channeling charges, like get up to 100 very quickly because you maybe miscalculated a special attack. Throw the special one, build up to 100 charges, dash back immediately after your first special one, and then just reset from there. Yeah, it's useful. But outside of that, the special one is primarily like the finisher for your special rotations specifically. The special 2 and the special 3 is really where you want to start the mind control process. So the special 2, very simple. The last 3 hits deal a burst of energy damage that scales with special attack damage, and then we already talked about the special 3, giving the Cerebro buffs. Actually, I talked about that in a previous recording, not this recording. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But anyway, even if I did talk about it already, the special 3, per Cerebro charge, you get one of those charges by completing a fight. You max out at 4, you get a big prowess buff for your special 3, maxing out at 4. So, Professor X really shines in medium to longer form content. I feel for shorter form content, he's definitely viable, but the ramp up to get to the damage, by the time you get to the damage and you're sort of going through the motions, other characters will have probably finished shorter form content fights faster, so I find Professor X to be extremely useful in medium form content and above, so around health pools like this. Now, you're going to notice I start immediately with a heavy attack. Going in for full combos here. The goal is to get to 100 channeling charges and be at around 2.8 to 2.9 bars of power. Now I'm going to throw a heavy attack, very long heavy charge there, basically using the entire stun to build up my heavy charge there. I'm already at over 50 charges. I'm going to throw another heavy attack here to build up my charges. Now I'm at 75, so now I have to use my basic heavy attacks to build charges. Pro tip there, throwing a heavy attack in the air during a special animation or like a special whiff can give you some extra windows and extra ability to build up charges without necessarily needing to land a parry and land a heavy attack. So, now I'm at a perfect power threshold. I'm at 2.9 bars of power, I have 100 channeling charges, and Winter Soldier does not have a bar of power. Now, what I want to do is I want to charge my heavy attack. So he's going to dash here, and that's not a huge deal, because I want to sort of explain my process here. I mentioned in the ability overview that charging your heavy attack, it will start your channeling process. You gain channeling charges while charging your heavy, and then also you start to channel after a special 1 or special 2. Charging your heavy starts the channeling process, so holding your heavy continues the channeling process. You can hold your heavy indefinitely with Professor X. So what I want to do here is I want to charge my heavy attack and cancel that heavy into my special attack. What that does is that gives me a prowess right away on the activation of my special, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to block immediately after my special 2 finishes, and then after I do a block input, I will immediately go back to heavy charging into my next special attack. And you repeat this process over and over until mind control runs out, and then on your last special attack, instead of doing the block tap, you're going to dash back to refresh your prowess, and then the rotation is the same. Now, additionally, if you don't want to do the block tap to then throw the next special attack after your initial special, you can also just continue charging your heavy, and that will restart a new channeling cycle, and that same channeling cycle will grant you a prowess on special activation. So I'm going to show off both here. So I'm going to dash back, charge my heavy, cancel, there's the channeling. Now I'm going to block, heavy charge again, there's 3 prowess. And now watch this. Instead of blocking, I'm going to heavy charge. The channeling popped up once again. And there's the channeling. There's the additional prowess. I like to do the block tap. I feel it's a lot more fluid. And then another pro tip is you want to wait as long as possible until your mind control is over to throw that final special attack. I let it go a little too long there. I'll do the Captain Marvel fight and show what it looks like to keep the channeling a little bit longer. So now I'm going to go into a bit of a longer fight to show exactly what it looks like to maintain the prowess in a fight that is not 550,000 health. Let's triple it and go fight Labyrinth of Legends Red Hulk and potentially Old Man Logan as well. The name of the game here is, I don't want to say simple because Professor X definitely requires a lot of finesse, but the execution is mostly the same. You just ramp up your prowess in a matchup, and until the opponent's dead, you just keep ramping your prowess, keep building your channeling charges, and yeah, that's the name of the game with Professor X. He also has incredibly high block proficiency, as you can see, perfect parries on Red Hulk Special 1 there, so that's also a nice little bonus for Professor X. Alright, one more heavy attack here. I'm going to bait the special from Red Hulk. I'm going to start charging my heavy, wait for him to come in, and now we're going to ramp up as I normally would in a Professor X matchup. In a decent loop, you can get between 6 to 9 prowess. It really depends on how much power you have at the start of your channeling process. So right there, as you can see, I waited till the very end of my mind control, and then I let my channeling build up a little bit, and I refresh my prowess. So that's a nice example of one fluid, very well executed Professor X rotation for the channeling. You can also get a little crazy and start throwing heavies into the air if you have the falter active, because the falter will save you if you end up, you know, taking a basic hit, or would be taking a basic hit. You're not actually going to with the falter active. Gonna throw the relic here, heavy charge right into the special 2 here, and the process is the same. Throw my special 2 again. I'm gonna throw a special 1 here, and then go for a refresh very quickly, because my prowess are about to fall off. Do another heavy charge here, and now I'm gonna go for a quick block tap, heavy charge, and right before mind control ends, throw another special 1, and let the channeling charge me for a little bit, and then right before channeling ends, I get the nice refresh, and that's 17 prowess. So that's up from 9 to 17. So that's, I believe, 8 more prowess that I just gained there. Like I said, a decent ramp up for Professor X. You're looking at anything between 5 to 9 prowess in a single ramp up. He also has great heavy reach, as you've just seen there. So now at this point, I'm just going to charge my heavy fully. Took a little bit of a risk there, but it honestly doesn't matter because Red Hulk is absolutely toast. So that is the general gist of Professor X, the general understanding and way to play him. There's a lot of finesse that goes into it, and he ramps up well over time. There's a little bit of a waiting process to like get back up to the special 2, but if you're using him in long-form content primarily, then that waiting process is sort of innate because long-form content, well, it takes longer than shorter-form content. So that is my little revisit and a guide to Professor X, how to use him effectively. Let me know down in the comments below if you're a fan of Professor X. I always have been, and I always will be. I really hope at some point soon I can awaken my Professor X on my main account. He's still unawakened to this very day. I've had him for almost 2 years now as a 7-star, and he is still unawakened somehow, some way. So one day, I'll probably get the awakened ability, but until then, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing and also hitting that like button. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.